Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Wednesday, September 10th, and it's time for your weekly visit with Baylor Director of Sports Journalism, Jerry Hill. Each week, Jerry will join us to give us a rundown on the latest in Baylor Athletics. Once we're finished up, we typically have Grace and I typically have a mailbag to answer your questions, but let's get started with Jerry. Jerry, thanks for hopping on once again.
Thank you, Cole. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's kind of look back to the weekend with Baylor football. Obviously, a little bit of a frustrating trip up there to Salt Lake City. I think there's some positives to take away from that, even though there were some struggles. What would you say that you would pull as your biggest positive from that loss, that 23-12 loss to Utah?
I mean, I think the easy answer is the defense, what they were able to do. They actually shut out Utah over the last three quarters. I know Cam Rising got hurt late in the second quarter, but even before then, they had kind of figured him out a little bit and were doing a much better job on him. So I think what the defense was able to do. And then, I think another obvious answer would be Palmer Williams. I mean, I haven't seen that kind of a game from a punter since Daniel Sepulveda. So, and even Daniel didn't have one game like this. So kudos to him. And, obviously I'm sure the elevation helped. And I think he even said it post game. But, to average 62.7 yards per punt and really flip the field every time he punted, they didn't even have a lot of returns. So I would say probably those two things, Colt.
Yeah, so we actually have an interview with Palmer that will be coming out later this week, and we asked him, did he expect it? And he said, well, when I'm warming up in Waco and I'm practicing in Waco, I'm usually around that 63-yard per average punt. So it's a really intriguing interview. So wait a little bit longer into the week to listen to that one, but really cool story kind of about his path to doing what he did, and hopefully it continues this year. So offensively, obviously the struggles we all saw the struggles. How do you think this offense can bounce back? And do you think and expect growth throughout the season for the entire unit?
Yeah, and I would say one thing, and I'm not, trying to put on the green and gold, glasses or whatever, but I do think this Utah team and this Utah defense is probably the best unit you're going to see maybe all year. So I think that's part of it. I do think that first quarter in particular, there was a little bit of not ready for the big moment, not ready for the big stage. So now you've been on it, you've gone through that. That's got to help. And I do think they, kind of built on that. I mean, there was only really a couple of big plays, but you were able to do some in the second half. It was minus 10 yards in the first quarter. So I'm like, let's at least get the positive yards. And I think it was 48 yards by halftime. So, to put up, almost 200 yards in the second half, and put some points on the board, that was big. Would have loved to have seen them go down and put some points on the board there at the end to really kind of tighten it up and, make this a really interesting game, but they weren't able to do that. So I think there were some positives, Colt. I think DeQuan played again better as he went along. To me, the frustrating part was that ending, and a little bit of that was on the defense too. You just didn't have a lot of time. Utah had gone like 7.5 minutes on a drive when if you get the ball back, you've got time and you can score twice. But Utah kind of took that away from you, and then Baylor just wasn't able to do enough. After Utah missed the field goal, but. Yeah, I mean, and I do think, I don't know if you'd agree with me or not, but I think the offensive line, again, played better as you went along, protected fairly well after that, strip sack there in the first quarter. So I think this is a better offensive line than you had last year. I think that's fact. But they'll continue to get better too as they play together and as this group, really kind of grows together, I guess.
Yeah. So you basically had 4 scoring opportunities in that game and turned away with, 13 or 12 points at the end of the day. A blocked field goal return for a touchdown kind of swung the game completely.
Right.
So obviously frustration, but you just hope they can bounce back this weekend as Baylor returns to McLean Stadium to face Air Force in a blackout game, which will be cool for Baylor fans. Game is at 6:30 p.m. Central Time and will be on Fox Sports 1. So, Jerry, moving on to some positive news, the volleyball team continues to play well. Yeah. Defeated Rice last Tuesday, went on to defeat number 18 Minnesota on Friday, and then took number 6 Wisconsin down to the wire. I mean, probably a contest that everyone on that team says we should have won that despite having to come back from all the way that they were down in a hole. Do you believe that we have learned more about the potential for this team over the last week since we last talked?
I agree. I mean, that Rice win maybe goes a little unnoticed, but, beating them on the road, that's their only road game for a while. So I think that was big. And then you kind of went into this weekend, probably, with at least my mindset was, man, if you could split, that would be great. But then when you got to Saturday and you're right there, you want to come away with that win. But, knocking off Minnesota, that was a nice win. And then, going, like you said, going to the wire with Wisconsin and really playing well, making that a 5-set match because they lost the first 2. That's the thing. You had a chance for a reverse sweep and weren't able to pull it off. But, Elise McGee, I know played great in that one. And, this is a team that I do think they're kind of finding their identity and they're just getting better and better. I wasn't sure what to expect from this team coming into the season. You did have seniors for the first time. I mean, they had no seniors last year. So I think that's a factor. But Jackie Barrett Frazier, the setter, has played really well, kind of made a big difference, here early on. So this is a team that I think is playing with a lot of confidence. And like you said, I think they probably left that match on Saturday thinking they let one slip away. That was one that they could have got and, moved even farther up the polls. They moved up to number 18. They were 23rd last week and moved ahead of Minnesota in the poll. So, I think the future is really bright for this team. I think they can do some damage in the Big 12. So yeah, it's been a good start for them. Really good start.
Yes, Lauren Brasinho was named Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week for the team. Obviously, a key piece to everything they did last week and all throughout the season, and will continue to be a key piece. Baylor will face LSU and Texas amongst the games that they have before Big 12 play, so they're going to be tested again. Can you speak specifically about that Texas matchup and how intriguing that is? Obviously, a non-conference match now, and Texas might not be the Texas that they were last year, the last couple of years, based on what we've seen, but still a big challenge.
And that's a great match to schedule. I think some people would be scared off. I mean, this is the team that, particularly volleyball, kind of ran the Big 12 for how many ever years. But I credit Ryan McGuire for, being, confident enough in your team and knowing what you can get out of that match. And the fact that it's home, that's a great thing too. So, that's a team that always has like Olympic level talent. And this year is no different. I know they have lost at least once, maybe a couple of times this year, and they fell from 1st to 6th. But this is still a really good Texas team. And I think the goal there would be, hey, be in the match, kind of like you were against Wisconsin, with a chance to win it in the 4th or 5th set.
Yeah. So great week for the volleyball team. Another couple of big weeks moving forward. But now let's look at the soccer team. Our last visit, they had just come off of a insane win over Texas A&M. In soccer terms, I don't know what you would call it, but thrilling is what I looked at. They played SMU down 1-0, make a comeback and win that one. And ultimately later in the week would fall to number 22 Iowa at Iowa 0-3. But I mean, overall, another strong week. And we know that the tough loss to Iowa kind of might take away a little bit from the win at SMU. But still, I mean, it seems like, again, another team that's becoming battle tested, that's kind of showing where they are and continue to trend up in my mind.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it, the Iowa game, I mean, the final score is no lie, 3-0, but that was not a 3-0 game. It was 1-0 going into the last 5 or 6 minutes. Tyler Isgrig actually had a shot that went off the crossbar that would have tied it. And then Iowa scored a couple of goals late, including one on a penalty kick. So they were much closer than maybe, certainly than the 3-0 score indicated. But, Azul Alvarez continues to play really well in goal. And it was good to see them be tested on the road like that against SMU and come back and win, because, they really hadn't been in that position where they had to come back and win, other than the Mississippi State game in the season opener. So it was good to see them, hey, we're down at half, let's go play another 45 and let's see what we can do. And they were able to pull that one off. And then, just the schedule as a whole, the fact that they beat Portland in Hawaii, they won at SMU, they beat A&M here. They've got really good RPI wins. And again, I think this is a team that can really do something. They're going to be, I would say, even confident going into the Thursday matchup against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 opener. But yeah, I think this is a team that kind of knows who they are and what they're capable of. I think the Iowa loss stings, but it also showed they can go kind of toe to toe with a top 25 team like that. They didn't come away with the win, but it was on the road, and we're able to get some shots in the second half. They were shut out completely in the first half, 11-0, I believe, in shots. But again, Alvarez really did a great job in goal, and then Baylor created some opportunities in that second half. So even with the loss, I think they go into Big 12 play with a lot of momentum, and then they play Texas State in their final non-conference game on Sunday, so to kind of finish out this next week.
Yeah, so you mentioned Oklahoma State being the Big 12 opener for the soccer team. What about Oklahoma State? They're undefeated. I think they have a couple ties as well. So what can you tell us about Oklahoma State and the challenges that they present?
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the preseason favorites. This is a team that traditionally has been really good, and this year is no different. They certainly have some great pieces, but they really haven't been challenged by the schedule. It hadn't been a great schedule, so we'll see. I mean, I think, obviously they've been tested some, but they haven't played the quality of schedule that Baylor has had. So Baylor has gone out and played good people, even some people on the road, obviously. Iowa and Mississippi State jumps out, and then SMU even on the road. So I think Baylor has been tested, so they're not going to be scared by Oklahoma State. Maybe some teams in the past might be scared by that ranking and how good Oklahoma State has been in the past. But I think this team has the confidence, and particularly playing at home, to give the Cowgirls a test and see if they can open Big 12 play with a 1-0 record.
Yeah. So Baylor's now 5-2 on the soccer field. Looking to build on that. Big 12 play starts this week. You mentioned the Texas State game on Sunday. Truly, there's a lot of success between the volleyball and the soccer teams. Football obviously getting going. You hope they can bounce back this weekend. But Jerry, really appreciate your time once again. Look forward to visiting with you next week, hopefully after a football win and a few more wins for volleyball and soccer. I
appreciate it. Thanks, Colt.
Back now with Grayson to do our weekly mailbag segment. Thanks to Jerry for hopping on and spending that time with us, just talking all things Baylor athletics. Grayson, let's just get right into these questions now. I think there's quite a few that we wanted to get to. We won't be able to get to all of them this week, but hopefully we can get a few good segments, a few good answers for you on this time around. So let's start with Scrub Lord. Do you think our offense will improve, or is the rest of the season going to look similar to the Utah game? Grayson, I'll let you start with this one.
So I think there are a couple areas that I think we need to talk about. So the first part is Baylor's probably not going to play a defense the level of Utah's all year. I would be surprised if anyone has as good of a defense. So I think naturally that's going to make the offense look better pretty much every single week going forward. Now, the question is how much better? To me, that's all going to come down to how well does Baylor's passing attack improve? And make no mistake, it has to improve. It's got to get better. It has not been at the level that it needs to be at. Part of that was due to playing Utah. The other part of that was due to, I think, just, some up and down quarterback play, some up and down offensive line play. I just think in general, it hasn't really all come together yet. And I continue to use the word identity. they don't have an identity yet. And so until they find one, I don't think this offense is truly going to be unleashed. For me, I don't necessarily believe this is going to be a great rushing football team. I really don't. I think when they face certain matchups, they'll be able to run, but in other matchups, I think they will struggle. So to me, it all comes down to, can they throw the football? Can they complete passes deep downfield? And can they add just some wrinkles where they're able to get some layups in this passing attack? I think at the end of the day, that's really going to dictate where they're going. I do think they will get better. I just currently am not sure how much better, how big that step is quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on it. In my mind, it's kind of the balance between you're not playing Utah anymore and you improve offensively. So you mentioned who's going to be as good as what Utah presented defensively. I have the K-Ford defensive rankings right now, and this is kind of up-to-date numbers. And I'm going to look in the Big 12. Air Force is not included this, but it is currently Colorado 112th, BYU 49th. Iowa State is up to 18th in his analytics. Texas Tech 108, Oklahoma State 53, TCU 38, West Virginia 83, Houston 85, and Kansas 51. I don't know. This is after the Utah game. I didn't look to see what Utah was, so it kind of gives you an idea. Utah is going to be up there most of the year. Iowa State's probably the most comparable right now, and they're at number 18. Outside of that, you're not going to see that type of struggle or that type of decent defense that Baylor will face. And so you want Baylor to get better. The competition backs off a little bit. Not an ideal time to face Utah. So I think there's kind of that balance of Baylor can get better. The competition isn't nearly as good either. So I'm anxious to see this weekend. I think it'll give us a better idea, kind of a mid-tier team in terms of overall defense scheme. Obviously, it doesn't have nearly Air Force doesn't have nearly the talent that the rest of the Big 12 will have, but I expect them to be disciplined and provide more of a challenge in Tarleton, just not as much, obviously, as Utah.
Right. And I think it's important to mention, you went through those numbers. Just to be clear, most of these teams have played one FBS opponent and one FCS opponent. So that also kind of skews your numbers a little bit, or at least it can. And so I think that's important to remember, that some of these defenses are going to be more fraudulent than they currently are, and then others might take a big step forward. But I think in general, you look at the Big 12, I personally think that the defenses that are actually really, really good in the Big 12 are Utah, Iowa State, and then probably Kansas State, who Baylor doesn't play this year. The only other one that's kind of up in the air, I guess, is TCU. But with how shaky they looked that first weekend, I'm not really sold on it. And so that leads me to just three teams. Baylor doesn't play K-State, and the other two are going to be tough wins regardless. So outside of that, I do think the offense should take a natural step forward based on who they're playing, but make no mistake about it, they have to get better, particularly throwing the football.
Yeah, and you'd hope that would just come naturally with the progression of the offensive scheme, but we'll see. So next question up from Helberg Stan. What are y'all's early picks for most improved and or biggest positive surprise player or players? Grayson, jump on this one and I'll come in after you again.
Okay. How about we do both sides? So let's start with offense, maybe. Yeah. Okay. So starting with offense, most improved or biggest surprise. That's a good question, because they've been so shaky on offense so far that I feel like it's kind of hard to say surprise or most improved. I think that Michael Trigg has been pretty solid in the start to the year. He's really kind of he's the only one who had a good first game and then came back in the Utah game and actually had a little bit of production as well. So I guess I guess he would be the most improved. I think that as we move forward, there will be more names that pop up. I specifically think Bryson Washington is a name we've talked about a lot, who could step into that role. And hopefully some of these other receivers step into that as well. But I think Trigg is probably the guy at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that one makes the most sense. I mean, they're at the second half of the Utah game. DeQuan Finn kind of settled in, and some of that was because of what Utah was giving up. But it seemed like he has been a pretty steady target for Finn. I'm anxious to see if that continues. But he's such a mismatch problem that I think that you will see it used more and more, especially if the offense can continue to progress. Maybe not as much as a safety valve, as much as he's just a big play threat potentially. So I think that's a good one. I'm with you. My breakout player would have been Bryson Washington, or surprise player He just hasn't been on the field. There was a lot of talk about him, a lot of buzz about him in fall camp back to the spring. He just hasn't been on the field. I'm anxious to see if that gets going this weekend. I would say kind of an interesting one. We haven't talked about the offensive line, but Campbell Barrington has been really solid in pass protection. And that's kind of the bright spot right now on the offensive line. Like his offensive pass protection grades, believe it or not, are really good, up around 85 through 2 games. And you can point to all of the weaknesses of the offensive line, but he's been steady. And if they're going to have a better and improved offensive line throughout the season, having your right tackle be pretty steady is important. As much as it is you need a left tackle, your right tackle has to be pretty steady as well.
Yeah, he was one that actually came to my mind when I was thinking about it. We don't give the offensive line enough credit. And as you know, sometimes they have struggled this year, but I do think for him specifically in pass protection, it's been a big step forward. And this was a guy who had some moments last year. It's just you point to the ones that were bad and they were really bad. But then the other moments, he was pretty good. And so I think he's kind of building off of that and building the consistency. He's definitely been a bright spot in the offensive line along with Colton Price, who I think has probably been their second best offensive lineman so far this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. So looking on the defensive side of the ball, I think it's easy to point to Jackie Marshall because of the fact that he's just kind of been a disruptive player on the defensive line but I wouldn't call him a surprise. I think Trevin Mai sorry, man, I know I've mispronounced that a million times, but Trevin, I apologize. I can't ever get it right. But yeah, I think that his impact has been steady. It's only been 2 games, but like he's a guy that's making disruptive plays pretty regular whenever he's asked to. And we actually have an interview coming up with Inoke Brechterfield and what happened with Trevin and how he developed throughout this offseason. And he's showing it almost every single snap. And so I'm anxious to see more of him as they get into Big 12 play, more as a pass rusher as well. And we'll see. I think if there's one guy right now, that would be my surprise player through 2 games.
I think that's a great one. Trevin has been awesome. You're exactly right on Jackie Marshall as well. Those 2 guys have really played well. I think Jackie, it's tough because he just missed all of last year. We knew what he was capable of. We knew he was going to be really good for them last year. He just got hurt. And so it took him a little while to really, put on the film exactly who he can be. And we've seen it this year. He's been awesome. But I think that this is a good question because part of this question was most improved. And I don't think that at any point during Garmin Randolph's career has he played better than he currently has to start this season, or at least looked better. I think he's taken a big step forward. I would be really disappointed if he didn't continue kind of this emergence that we've seen so far this season. I think, having him and Steve Linton on the field, I think helps him. I think also just the fact that he's gotten bigger. It seems like he's gotten stronger, much better against the run than he has been in the past, at least to my eye. And so I think in general, he's one that I've looked at and just been, man, I think he's a lot better than he was a year ago. And I really believe that with Garmin. And he's been a very nice bright spot on this defense. And you're exactly right, though. Surprises haven't necessarily been there. I think it's just been more so steady play and guys developing, which has been really, really encouraging to see that under Inoke Brechterfield.
Yeah, you would expect to that. I think even last year, looking to this group, the defensive front specifically, there's a lot of youth behind those upperclassmen. And you would just say, let's hope this happens. Let's hope they progress. And we've seen that. And you want to see it on the offensive line. But defensive line, that's just a group that's gotten better. And I will say about Garmin, he got hurt in the first game last year. I believe it was a high ankle sprain. Yeah. I just don't know if he ever came back from that fully. I think he was set for having a big year. And if he would have had a big year, maybe he doesn't return. Kind of the pace that he's on right now, I think there's going to be a lot of NFL teams that are interested in him because of his size. And he's a guy that probably could only continue to get bigger with his frame. Like I think he could be a guy that's playing almost at 300 pounds by the time it's all said and done. If he's truly at 270 pounds or whatever he is right now, just continue to grow. So definitely a good pick there. I think in that defensive front, you have a lot of guys that could potentially be on this list. So let's move to the next question from Art J. Adams. And I personally like this question because I've watched a lot of the Big 12 in the last few days. But what are your win-loss expectations now after 2 weeks into the season for Baylor based on seeing other teams in the Big 12? like, and this is part of what I had these numbers up for on a spreadsheet, like just kind of filling out the Big 12. And obviously it's early with advanced analytics. I think K4 does a good job of projecting rather than just taking what was last year and putting it on into this year. And Baylor truly, like, there's some matchups like that I like the advanced analytics and just the eyeball test. I don't know if there's any games that I'm like, oh, definitely a win now that wasn't before. I think the games that you felt could be wins are I like them more now than I did 2 weeks ago. You just kind of trending that. Like, great example is Texas Tech. Like, the matchup there, even though it's in Lubbock, Tech's defense has just been really tough. Like, they just haven't looked very good. They've given a lot of explosive plays, pass and run. And in a game like that could kind of be a swing game for the season, that's trending in Baylor's favor. Now, there's a few of them like that, and I'll let you hit on a few of them. But in games where Baylor's going to need their offense to carry them, or them to do a little bit more, you want that opposing defense to be a little bit weaker, and then you want to lean on your defense to help you get the win. That could be a game that potentially swings in Baylor's favor, even though it's on the road.
So for me, the real simple answer to this is I still think 6-6 is my expectations. I think they're probably going to beat some teams that maybe they shouldn't beat, and then lose some games that maybe many people feel like they shouldn't lose. I don't feel like I'm at a point where I think this team is going to be super consistent all year long. I think it's going to be very matchup dependent. The only game on this schedule that I continue to believe they're for sure losing is the game at Iowa State. I have a hard time thinking that they're going to be able to go into Ames here in 3 weeks and beat Iowa State. Maybe if injuries happen, maybe something like that possible. But I feel like that game is the only one that I look at on the schedule and go, that's going to be a really, really tough one for them to win. Outside of that, you're right. I mean, Baylor's got opportunities here. They got an opportunity against Colorado after this Air Force game and BYU. I think both those games are very winnable. The Tech game got infinitely more winnable, I feel like, over the course of the last 2 weeks. They honestly might be one of, if not the worst team in the Big 12. I mean, we'll see.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Houston probably holds that title for now, but Houston's lost to UNLV and Oklahoma. I don't know how horrible that is. So outside of that, though, Oklahoma State's going to be tough. TCU's going to be tough. They always are. They're solid teams, but they're at home. You got to take care of business at home and find ways to win those games. West Virginia's going to be tough. Houston should be a win. And then the Kansas game at the end of the year feels like it's a little more winnable than it was originally, even though my mindset was, well, is Jalen Daniels really going to make it all the way to the end of the year anyways? We'll see on that. Yeah, it's still a toss-up type game. I think KU will probably be favored by the time Baylor gets there, but it's a possible win and it's at home. So you're exactly right. I think things have opened up a little bit. But I do not have the confidence to start saying, oh, yeah, they're going to go 8-4. I just can't do that. I have them as a 6-6 team still.
Yeah. And so my answer to that question would be the same, 6-6. I feel like that's a safe number because they're winnable games. Now, in the next 3 weeks with Air Force, Colorado, and BYU, like, we're going to just get so many, there's going to be this question's answered because of the schedule that Baylor's played thus far. We don't know everything about we won't know everything about this team until the end of the year, but it's hard to gauge when you played the worst team on your schedule and arguably the best team in the toughest environment. So I'm sticking with 6-6 until I see these next 3 games, and then we can make a better prediction. So great question, Art J. Adams. We'll move on. This one's pretty cool question because another guy we interviewed, but Bear Are Cool 1, 2, 3, 4. How much does having an elite punter change the game? I mean, so we interviewed Palmer Williams after having 2 70-yard punts. That interview will be out later this week in our final episode of the week. But I mean, my initial thought was like, this could potentially change the way that Dave Aranda goes about fourth downs, depending where they are on the field. You have a guy like this, and cool nugget from that interview. Apparently Palmer averages like 63 yards per punt in practice. So like, this isn't anything new to them. And I think it can change the game for the defense specifically. Like, if you have faith in your defense and you say, hey, let's just get him to the 10, the 5, regardless of where we are on the field, Coach Aranda has to have more confidence in that special team unit to get that done, and then lean on his defense that he's calling the plays for.
I think it is massive as well. I mean, Baylor's actually got a pretty good history of really good punters. I mean, when you kind of look back at, I know during my time at Baylor, they had Spencer Roth and Drew Galitz, who just absolutely were awesome. I mean, both those guys did a great job at flipping field position and putting Baylor's defense in a great opportunity to make plays. And I think that's exactly. Oh, and I didn't even mention Isaac Power as well, who was awesome for Baylor during Rule's time. And then, I think he had a year or two with Aranda as well. But in general, Palmer Williams already looks like a guy that's trending in that direction. I think that when you have someone like this, it allows you to kind of lean on your defense even more, but also it just puts your defense in such favorable positions, and it gives you the opportunity to get 3 and outs. It gives you the opportunity to get the crowd at McLean Stadium involved when you do that at home and you have them backed up, in their own territory. And that also gives you an opportunity to, if you pin them deep, force the other team to answer and punt it as well and try to, flip the field position again. But it gives Baylor an opportunity to have the ball at, the 40 or 45 or 50 yard line if they make a mistake or stuff like that. So yeah, it is huge. It definitely increases your opportunity to win games. I mean, I think in general, if Baylor hadn't made the mistakes they made against Utah, his punting might have, come to the forefront even more.
Yeah. So the first punt he had against Utah, it actually worked to Baylor's favor. And then they got the field goal blocked and didn't let it get the point. So he punted it 70 yards or whatever it was. They pin him back. They punt back to Baylor, and then they're going in to kick the field goal. It's blocked. They return it for 7 points. So he actually almost single-handedly got them 3 points because the offense didn't do much after that. So it's I mean, there's going to be times like that this season where you might be sitting on your own 25 and you're thinking, all right, they're going to get pretty good field position. You're at your own 15. They're going to get the opposing offense is going to get pretty good field position. And then he just flips the field and they're backed up inside their 10. I think to an extent, maybe the elevation helped, but it doesn't sound like it's impacted him much in practice that different. So great question, Bear. Cool. I think that we will see that come into play this year if there's any close games. So, but Baylor family, that's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Thanks to Jerry Hill once again, and thank you all for listening. For Grayson, I'm Colt. Have a great Wednesday, and sick 'em Bears.